In the dead of winter, when the world seems to forget how to breathe, a cardboard box sat trembling on the edge of a frozen ditch. It wasn't shivering from the wind, but from something inside. Something small. Something alive. There was no note, no name, just a profound silence wrapped in snow. Inside that box, shivering beneath layers of damp newspaper, was a dog. He wasn't a puppy, too old for that kind of innocence, too weary for wide-eyed wonder. His ribs pressed against skin stretched thin by hunger. One ear was torn, his eyes clouded not by age, but by a deep betrayal. He had known hands once. Hands that fed him, that scratched behind his ears, that called him good boy. But those hands had vanished, replaced by colder ones that shoved him into darkness and drove away without a single look back. For 3 long days, he waited. He wasn't waiting for rescue. He didn't know that word anymore. He waited because stopping meant dying, and somewhere deep in his bones, a stubborn ember refused to go out. Then, headlights. Not the harsh glare of passing traffic, but slow, deliberate beams cutting through the fog. A pickup truck rolled to a stop. The engine died. A door creaked open. Footsteps followed. Heavy, measured, closer. The dog didn't bark. He didn't whimper. He just watched, his eyes wide, his body coiled in that fragile space between hope and terror. A man knelt. Not in pity, but in presence. He didn't reach out. He didn't speak. He just sat there in the snow beside the box, as if giving the dog permission to decide his own fate. Minutes passed. The wind seemed to hold its breath. Then the dog took a single step forward, then another, until his nose brushed against the man's gloved hand. That simple touch, it didn't fix everything, but it was a beginning. The man's name was Elias. He was a retired search and rescue officer, a widower, a man who had spent his life pulling strangers from wreckage, only to return each night to a house that echoed with absence. He hadn't planned to adopt a dog. He hadn't planned anything, really, but some choices aren't made. They're felt. He wrapped the dog in his coat and carried him home. The first night, the dog slept curled in the farthest corner of the living room, flinching at every creak of the old house. Elias didn't force closeness. He left out food, water, and a worn blanket. And he gave him space, so much space. But every morning, Elias sat on the floor with his coffee, reading aloud from old field manuals, his voice steady, calm, and never demanding. Slowly, the distance between them began to shrink. 1 week in, the dog lay 3 feet away. 2 weeks later, he was at Elias's feet. After 3 weeks, he rested his head gently on the man's boot. They didn't name him right away. Elias said that names carry weight, and this dog needed to choose his own. Months passed. Winter bled into spring. The dog's coat grew thick and healthy. The cloudiness in his eyes cleared. He began to follow Elias into the woods behind the house, not just as a pet, but as a partner. Then came the storm. It wasn't just any storm. It was a nor'easter that swallowed the entire county. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Power lines vanished under a thick sheet of ice. And deep in the ravine behind Elias's property, a hiker went missing. The official search teams were grounded. Helicopters couldn't fly. Hope was thinning with every passing hour. But Elias knew that terrain. And he knew his dog. Without a word, he clipped on a harness, tucked a flashlight into his coat, and stepped out into the whiteout. The dog didn't hesitate for a second. He led the way. Through blinding snow, over slick rocks, across a creek swollen with meltwater, he moved with a certainty that defied logic, as if the forest itself was whispering directions only he could hear. Then, a sound. Faint. Human. It was a woman, half buried under a fallen branch, her leg pinned, her voice hoarse from calling into the void. The dog reached her first. He licked her face. He stayed by her side. When Elias arrived, he found the dog lying across the woman's chest, sharing his warmth, guarding her like she was his own. They got her out. Alive. All because of him. Back home, soaked and exhausted, Elias knelt by the fire. The dog collapsed beside him, steam rising from his fur, and for the very first time, Elias spoke his name. Kai. It meant ocean in an old tongue, vast, powerful, and healing, a force that returns what was lost. Kai lifted his head. He looked directly into Elias's eyes. And he wagged his tail, not wildly, but with a quiet certainty, as if to say, "I'm home." Years later, they still walk those woods together. Elias is slower now, and Kai is grayer around the muzzle, but they are side by side, always. And sometimes, when the wind howls just right, you can hear it, not as a warning, but as a reminder that even the most broken things can be remade. That abandonment is not the end of a story, it's the beginning of a different kind of love, and that sometimes the ones we think we're saving are actually the ones who save us. Thank you for watching this story unfold with us. If it touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories that remind us of the power of connection. We'll see you next time.